All right, today we are dividing unit fractions by non-zero whole numbers. So dividing a unit fraction, so we're starting with a fraction, that's what we have, and we're dividing it by another fraction, a non-zero whole number, not a fraction. So yesterday, the cooking club made a pan of lasagna. They left half the lasagna for 4 members, so we're dividing a fraction by a whole number. What fraction of the pan did each photography club member get? So we have 1/2, and we're dividing it into for the 4 members. So, so how much is each person going to get? So if you divide it up, you'll see how much will each person get of the whole lasagna, and you can do keep the first number, leave the first number alone, change the sign, and flip. So you'll see each person will get 1/8 of the fraction. So 1/2 divided by 4 is 1/8. So if you take a half and you divide it into 4 even pieces, it's going to be 1/8 of the original whole. I know, a little tricky. What equation can you write to model this problem? So we just did that. We have 1/2 is what we have, half of a lasagna, divided between 4 people equals 1/8. Or you could say 1/2 times 1/4 equals 1/8. And we got that by keeping the first fraction, changing the sign, and flipping the next value. Remember, the whole number is written as a fraction by putting a 1 underneath. So when we flip it, the inverse or the opposite will be, this was the whole number. I can always represent a whole number by putting a 1 underneath. And when I flip it, I get 1/4. Okay, so we're moving on here. Doesn't want to go. Here we go. So on the next page, we have half a pan of cornbread, just like we had half a pan of lasagna. So what we have is half a pan of cornbread. Ann, Beth, and Chuck are sharing the leftovers equally. What fraction of the original cornbread does each person get? So we're starting with a half, and we want to divide it by 3 different people. Now they're not starting with a whole pan, but we can easily draw what's missing. We've got our half pan of cornbread and we divide it into thirds. Each person is not getting 1/3 because they're not starting with a whole. They're starting with a half. So we're getting 1/2 divided by 3, 1/2 times 1/3. Each person will get 1/6. Each one of these pieces represents 1/6 of an original pan of cornbread. Another way you can do it is using a number line and shade in a half on the number line and partition the half into 3 equal pieces. So this represents the whole cornbread. Half of it's gone, so we're only addressing half the cornbread. We're dividing half of the cornbread into 3 equal pieces, and each piece is representing 1/6. Because you have to remember, we're going all the way over the whole here. Okay. And if you move down a little bit, in the example above, how is dividing 3 the same as multiplying by 1/3? So both of them are separating, dividing by 3 and multiplying by 1/3, you're both separating a group into 3 equal parts. All right. In the example on the top of page 552, suppose 4 people are sharing half of the cornbread. So our problem will change a little bit. So we have 4 people, and we're starting out with half the cornbread, and we're dividing it by 4 people. So this is kind of like the pizza one on the first page. So if we multiply it by 1/4, each person's going to get 1/8 of the original cornbread. So if here's my cornbread, we said half's already gone. We only have half left, and we're going to have 4 people eating it. But remember, you've got to figure out what each one of these shapes equal. So you're kind of working on a grid like this. So each shape would equal 1/8. 1/8, 1/8, 1/8. 4/8 equals 1/2. So each kid would get 1/8. When you divide a unit fraction by a non-zero whole number greater than 1, will the quotient be greater than or less than the unit fraction? So when you divide a unit, when you start with something smaller than a whole, and when you're dividing it by something larger than a whole, you're going to wind up with much smaller, less than. So you're starting with something smaller than a whole, a fraction. And even if you're dividing by a whole number, like we were here, we divided by 4, we're still going to wind up with something smaller than, we're never going to get a whole number at that. So it's always less than. And in the 3, 4, 5, and 6, we're going to use the drawing that's pictured to help you out. So if I have one for number 3, if I have a quarter, so here I have this quarter, and I want to divide it by 2, I'm dividing it in half. A quarter divided in half is going to equal, what's half of a quarter? It's 1/8. And if I use math, 1/4 divided by 2, 1/4 multiplied by 1/2 equals 1/8. That would be number 3. For number 4, using the shape here, now I've got a quarter and I'm dividing it into fourths. So what I have is 1/4, and what I'm dividing it into is fourths. So when I use the reciprocal, I wind up with 1/16. So each one of these little shapes, if I continued on in my drawing, I would have a 2/8, which is a denominator of 16, and I have one little guy, so it's 1/16. A half divided by 2, so I'm starting with a half, and I'm dividing it, we're starting with a half, we're dividing it into 2. Each piece will be 1/4. Again, 1/2 divided by 2 is the same as saying keep the first fraction, change the sign, flip the second fraction. Will be 1/4. And for number 6, I'm starting with a half and I'm dividing it into 4. So each little piece will be 1/8. Keep the first fraction, change the sign, flip the second fraction, and multiply 1/8. There you go. Great job.